Well, good morning, and thank you all again for being here on such an important occasion. This really is a somber but a sacred occasion for us here in the town of Clarkstown. This morning we recall U.S. Army Medic Specialist James Anthony Margro of the 326th Medical Battalion of the 101st Airborne Division. In a few moments, his sister and family will offer a few private reflections on his life. But allow me to offer a few words about his service and the importance of what we are doing here today. James Anthony Margro, or Jimmy as his family and friends called him, died just over 50 years ago on May 13, 1969, in one of the most intense battles of the Vietnam War. Several months ago, retired Clarkstown Police Chief Kevin Kilduff, who grew up with Jimmy, came to me and suggested that the town might honor him close to the anniversary of his death 50 years ago in Vietnam. According to news reports, Jimmy was just 20 years old when the chopper he was in was shot down on May 13, 1969, during Operation Apache Snow. According to the Journal News, Jimmy Margro was, at the time of his death, the 28th resident to have died in Vietnam. Unfortunately, he was not the last. He was a 1967 graduate of Spring Valley High School. He joined the Army in 1968. After basic training, he was sent to Texas for special training as a medic and a paratrooper. He began his tour of duty in Vietnam on November 24, 1968. He was a member of the illustrious 326th Medical Battalion of the 101st Airborne Division, whose origins date back to the First World War and continued in continuous service until the Iraqi War. Operation Apache Snow was a planned military operation involving 10 battalions in the Asaw Valley, which is being used as a staging area for attacks on U.S. forces, as well as a supply route from Laos into the northern part of South Vietnam. The initial assault began on May 10, 1969. Forces included the 187th, 501st, 506th Infantry Regiments, along with the 101st Airborne and the 9th Marine Regiment. The plan was to block the escape route of the North Vietnamese into Laos and destroy enemy strongholds within the valley. The fighting and operation were fierce and costly, with North Vietnamese regulars dug in on Hill 937. There were 11 infantry assaults up Hill 937 over 10 days of intense fighting. In the end, Hill 937 was captured. The soldiers who fought in the battle nicknamed the hill Hamburger Hill, which was an up-to-date reference to the bloody Korean War battle of Porkchop Hill. The battle was immortalized by Hollywood in the 1987 film bearing the same title, Hamburger Hill. History records Operation Apache Snow as a strategic victory for the United States, whereby the Viet Cong were forced from Hill 937 and largely driven from the valley for the short term. The fighting formally lasted until June 7, 1969, when the Viet Cong made a strategic retreat with U.S. forces in pursuit. However, since Hill 937 was deemed of little long-term lasting military value, it was eventually abandoned by the U.S. only a few short weeks later, which caused widespread outrage and a public outcry in the United States, given the intense cost. What was the cost of this operation? Well, during the battle, 675 North Vietnamese soldiers were killed, 3 were captured, along with 241 weapons of various kinds, including mortars, grenade launchers, machine guns, and other small arms, and over 100,000 rounds of various munitions. Taking these items out of enemy hands undoubtedly saved many American and South Vietnamese lives in the ensuing weeks and months. However, 102 U.S. soldiers and Marines paid the ultimate price and were killed, along with 31 South Vietnamese. Among the fallen was Specialist Jimmy Margro, who lived right here on Badger Street in New City. According to reports, Specialist Jimmy Margro was killed on the 4th day of fighting, May 13th, when the chopper he was in was brought down as he was seeking to render assistance to wounded American soldiers. His body was recovered 4 days later. To the family of Specialist Jimmy Margro, the pain of loss does not subside 50 years later. It becomes a dull ache that is always present. It is tinged with justifiable pride at his distinguished service and the sheer awe at his willingness to sacrifice his life in service for our country and to his fellow soldiers. While the war is long over, the memory of one who was loved and lost remains. Thus today, a grateful town and its people pause and do something sacred. Namely, we honor the memory of a fallen American hero. We do what Abraham Lincoln recalled that we must do on the plain of Gettysburg, as he immortalized and eulogized the fallen when he said, "It is for the living, rather, to be dedicated here to the unfinished work which they who fought here have thus so far nobly advanced. It is rather for us to be here dedicated to the great task remaining before us, that from these honored dead we take increased devotion to the cause for which they gave the last full measure of devotion, that we here highly resolve that these dead shall not have died in vain." I feel incredibly privileged as town supervisor to stand here before you as we are doing just that, dedicating and remembering a fallen hero who, while gone, will never be forgotten. We are rededicating ourselves to the ideals of liberty and freedom for which Jimmy died. Henceforth, as a part of the history of this town where he was raised, this corner, this street where he strode over 50 years ago, will bear his name. On behalf of the people of Clarkstown, to the family and friends of James Anthony Jimmy Margro, let me simply say thank you. We can never take away the pain of your loss, but know we appreciate and honor his sacrifice and his service. Know also that his life and legacy will forever be a part of this town, as this street is now honored to formally bear his name, today and forevermore. May God bless this American hero, and may God continue to bless the United States of America. Thank you. This time, several of Jimmy's family members will be offering some remarks. We'll ask Teresa Taylor to please come forward.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you all for attending. For those who do not know me, my name is Terry, and I am Jimmy's sisters. I would like to start by thanking Supervisor Holman and the Clarkstown Town Board for granting my request to have a commemorative street sign on Badger for my brother Jimmy. A special thank you to Erica for all your help in getting this organized. 50 years ago, the light from our household was gone. A voice we loved was stilled. A place was vacant in our house that can never be filled. Our family was never the same. On May 13, 1969, our dear brother Jimmy was killed in action in one of the worst battles of the Vietnam War on Hill number 937, better known as Hamburger Hill. The crew had received an urgent request to extract 6 seriously wounded soldiers, and it was impossible to land the aircraft. Jimmy had to climb out onto the skids of the aircraft in order to clear the aircraft while it was hovering above the trees. While the aircraft was hovering, he lowered the leader and continued to direct the pilot. At that time, enemy forces fired a rocket-propelled grenade. It entered through the open cargo door, causing the aircraft to crash and mortally wounding Jimmy and 2 other crew members. He was awarded the Silver Star for his bravery. This was the 2nd Silver Star he received. The first one was less than a month before on another evacuation of a seriously wounded pilot. When the wounded man was moved to an area where the hoist could be used to evacuate him, Jimmy left the aircraft, stood on the skid during the 10 minutes it took to hoist the wounded man aboard. After the casualty was on board, he kept the man alive while en route to the hospital. Jimmy also received the Air Medal for distinguishing himself while participating in sustained aerial flight in support of combat forces during the period of February 26th through May 11th, 1969. During this time, he actively participated in more than 25 aerial missions over hostile territory. This medal was awarded because of his determination to accomplish his missions despite of the hazards and by his outstanding degree of professionalism and devotion to duty. Devotion to duty is why Jimmy was on that rescue mission on May 13th. You see, he did not have to fly any more missions. We were first notified on May 15th when 2 Army officers came to our house. At that time, they could only tell us that he was missing in action because the helicopter he was on the other side of the hill, and they had not yet recovered it. It was 5 days later when Army officers and Father Kelleher came back to Badger Street. We knew what they were going to tell us. They had let us know that they had recovered his body. He was brought home and laid to rest at St. Anthony's on May 30th. Growing up here was wonderful. We had a great childhood. My parents bought the house on 28 Badger Street in 1956. Our next door neighbors were our aunts and uncles and our many cousins. The Margros, we were known. Along with our cousins, we played on the streets, which used to be an apple orchard. There was a stream over there where Jimmy and the boys would catch frogs. They played stickball in the street, and we played in the woods behind the house. In the winter, we would sleigh down Grand Street, which was crazy because it's such a steep hill. My cousin Christine and I were afraid to go down from the top. We thought we would crash. Jimmy was making fun of us, but egging me on. We started in the middle of the hill, only to have Jimmy hit me square in the face with a snowball, causing us to crash. He got a kick out of that. And my cousin Joey likes to tell the story. When they went to school, they did not want to go to school, so they decided to walk home. They were in 2nd and 3rd grade. I would love to make him his favorite breakfast toast, French toast in the morning. And my mother, who was a great cook, would cook Jimmy's favorite least dinner was beef stew. This was funny because when my brother was in country, he would request, among other things, my mother sent him Dinty Moore's beef stew, which drove my mother crazy. There is a big age gap between Jimmy and our younger siblings. Jimmy loved his little brother Robert and was so proud when Robert would follow him around and try to imitate him. We would try to get Regina to stop crying, and most times he was successful. He would talk to her and soothe her. He was very protective of his little sisters and brother. He loved Margaret's strawberry blonde hair. They were so young when he died, they did not get to know him. He would have been a great brother and uncle. We must never forget that freedom comes at a dear cost. We must honor the men and women we have lost in service to our country and vow to never forget, especially those who served in Vietnam. I do not believe they have been given the credit they deserve. Jimmy's story reminds us that in war we make sacrifices, and he made the ultimate sacrifice. It is said, no person is truly dead unless they are forgotten. So today, we remember. Love you, brother. Rest in peace. Yeah, Bob.
This is it. I'm just going to thank everybody.
That's fine. And then we'll on the other side. Just speak right into the mic.
Hi, I'm Bob Taylor, Jimmy Margro's brother-in-law. We would like to thank everybody for coming out and making this a memorable event. We would like to especially thank George Holman and Erica Machete, the members of VVA 333, especially the color guard who has done a great job. We want to thank Deacon Jim and Ava Ashton. In my opinion, it is high priority for all veterans groups to honor a fallen brother when the occasion arises. You did that here today, and we're very appreciative. A special thanks goes out to my wife, who worked tirelessly to coordinate this event. Finally, we would like to invite everybody back to our house for some food and drink. We're not too far, about 5 minutes. If you go down, and I left some Google Maps on the table here if need be. But if you go down New Hempstead to the end, make a right and a left, you're on Congress Road. If you follow Congress Road all the way up, you make a right on Brewery and a left on Woodside. We're the corner house on Woodside and Mine. The entrance is on the Mine Drive side. And again, just thank you very much for everybody's participation here. Is very welcome. Thank you.
So at this time, we're going to ask Jimmy's family to unveil the sign renaming the street. Who's the tallest in the family?
Anthony.
Anthony, thank you.
Come on, Anthony.
You can do it.
Come on.
Good trick.